I left in the dead of night, performing a ritual for safe passage. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. The devil lives in New Orleans. It was a warning, a fear passed down through generations, but I had always wondered, what does she mean? What lay beyond the beaded mask, neon lights, and whispered superstitions? New Orleans had called me for years, but not the version dressed for tourists. I had my itinerary planned, a dive into the mystical, the occult, the haunted. But when I arrived, the city had its own story to tell. All road by myself. We have made it. We have made it down here. I have got the hustle. I use ChatGPT to try to create my itinerary to make it here in 11 hours because that's exactly how long I have to hit all of the spots that I really want you all to see and experience with me.
My neighborhood. This would be the Treme area. This is my old neighborhood.
Treme.
Treme area, the oldest black neighborhood in America.
Wow. Look at the weather coming down here. It was supposed to rain and storm and everything else, but it looks like the weather is holding out, man. I was praying before coming down here. So the original plan was to go, as you could see, Café du Monde, but my Uber driver was so awesome. He told me that I should go and get some beignets from Loretta's. It's a black-owned little praline shop that has been around for a long time. And unfortunately, he told me Loretta had passed not too long ago, but her kids are keeping it going.
Thank you. Black rabbit.
Y'all, so just went over here and got my family something to try, and I'm gonna put that in my bag here in a second. And I gotta take my vitamins and medicines, but I have never tried a beignet before, and I was just thinking, like, pastries are nice, but like I want food. It's pretty good. It's not like overly sweet, and it's fresh and warm. It's got like this crispy exterior, but it's really soft, pillowy inside. And the powdered sugar adds just enough sweetness to it. I would definitely eat these again, like as a light dessert. I could be wrong, but it tastes like this can be flexible. Like it can be sweet, but it also could be savory. It reminds me of a funnel cake, and hopefully I don't offend nobody saying that, but that's what it reminds me of, because that's the only thing I have to compare it to. I began my journey where most visitors do, wandering through the French Quarter, where mysticism is neatly packaged and sold. I can't fault the shop owners, because after all, tourists come seeking a quick thrill. The places I chose to visit, however, were ones I felt particularly drawn to, like Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo, part shrine, part shop, and a magnet for curious visitors. Unfortunately, I was not able to film inside of the store. There is an altar dedicated to Marie Laveau, and where people have left, offerings and such. Boutique de Vampire, dripped with Gothic charm. One thing that I'm noticing is that I had handpicked a few shops to go to, but now that I'm down here, there's so many shops that have the same ambiance, commercialism, type thing. And unfortunately, because of that, I think I am going to stay away from going any more shops. Because what I'm finding is that it's a waste of time. I mean, as you know, I own House of Royal Botanica, if you could see it amongst all my stuff. And I mean, I know what they have. I know what's in there. So if you ever come down to New Orleans, I would suggest just, go in there and look. But once you see one, you've seen them all. And yes, of course, St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, the final resting place of Marie Laveau. The air was thick with stories, yet many felt rehearsed, curated more for entertainment than for truth. And so I sought to seek more. Let's rewind a bit. The real transformation began with my Uber driver, a native of New Orleans who, unprompted, began telling me about the Black history of the city, the side tourists don't come for. He pointed out streets, landmarks, names I hadn't planned to explore. My carefully curated itinerary crumbled beneath the weight of something far more profound. So I listened and I followed. I walked through Treme, the oldest African-American neighborhood in the country, a cradle of Black resilience and culture. It was here that free people of color built lives, businesses, and legacies despite the world trying to erase them. I had come to New Orleans expecting to see magic, but I didn't expect to feel it in the streets beneath my feet. Treme was different. It didn't glitter like the French Quarter, nor did it try to sell itself to tourists. It breathed, it pulsed, it carried the weight of people who refused to be erased. The story of Treme is not written in guidebooks, nor is it confined to museum walls. It lives in the very ground, in the cracked sidewalks where feet have marched for freedom, in the air that hums with the echoes of brass bands that refuse to be silenced. It is the oldest Black neighborhood in America, not because history was kind to it, but because the people here would not let it go. In the late 1700s, when most of America still denied Black people even the right to exist freely, Treme's free people of color, les gens de couleur libres, bought their own land in a world where ownership meant power. They carved out a sanctuary. They built homes. They played music. They wrote poetry. They prayed. They rebelled in ways both loud and quiet. And they danced. At St. Augustine's Catholic Church, I stood before the tomb of the unknown slave. Heavy chains dripped over a cross, a silent memorial to the nameless, faceless souls who built this city with their labor and their suffering. This was no tourist attraction. It was a wound, a testament, a demand to be remembered. Stumbled upon a festival, a jazz festival. So let's see. Congo Square, where both free and enslaved people, forbidden from expressing their humanity anywhere else, gathered on Sundays to drum, to chant, and to remember. Where rhythms older than America itself pounded into the earth, refusing to be forgotten. Where jazz was born. Not in the clubs, not in the recording studios, but in the hands of those who had lost everything but their music. The people of Treme did more than survive. They created. They turned struggle into sound, oppression into art. Their music would become jazz. Their traditions would become legend. Their resistance would shape history. And as I stood there, letting the pulse of this place move through me, I realized this wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a testament, a reminder that no matter how many times history tried to bury them, the people of Treme never stopped rising. And neither would I. As I stepped out of Congo Square, the echoes of the drums still vibrated in my chest. The energy here was undeniable. A place where history refused to be forgotten, where spirit and rhythm intertwined, where defiance took the form of dance and song. But the resilience of the enslaved and the free people of color in New Orleans didn't just survive in music. It lived in their faith, in the spiritual practices they carried from West Africa, and in the way they wove those traditions into a new world that sought to strip them of everything. That journey, the survival of African spirituality in the face of oppression, led me to my next stop, the New Orleans Historic Voodoo Museum. Founded in 1972 by Charles Massicot Gandolfo, a local artist and voodoo enthusiast, the museum was never meant to be just another tourist attraction. It was a preservation of misunderstood and misrepresented tradition, an attempt to separate myth from reality and honor the practitioners who kept voodoo alive in New Orleans despite centuries of demonization. Inside, altars draped in offerings, skull and candles lined up in quiet reverence, relics of a faith that is still practiced today. Here, I could trace the journey of voodoo from its West African roots, through the trauma of slavery and into the hands of New Orleans' most powerful spiritual figures, notably Marie Laveau. New Orleans was never about curses and Hollywood horror. It was about community, healing, and protection. It was a force of resilience, much like the people who carried it through generations. And standing there, among the relics and the stories, I realized this was more than history. It was legacy. I have to say, like, there really is a spirit to New Orleans. You know, you hear about it, you see it. People come down here to party. You know, they come down here to drink. But if you take the time to really kind of sit and look and feel, you can feel the spirit that is New Orleans. Outside of all the commercialism, the bars, you know, all of that stuff is fun, right? But it doesn't really get to the nitty gritty of what it is to be here. Leaving the New Orleans Historic Voodoo Museum, I couldn't help but reflect on the ways people have always turned to the spiritual for protection, healing, and power, especially in times when society denied them access to traditional means of care. But survival didn't just come through ritual and faith. It also came through medicine, through knowledge passed down, through remedies crafted from herbs, roots, and intuition. And in New Orleans, where magic and medicine often blurred together, the history of healing was just as complex as the history of the city itself. That's what led me to my next stop, the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum. Housed in the farmer shop of America's first licensed pharmacist, Louis J. de Filio. Forgive my pronunciation if that's incorrect. This museum tells the story of early medicine in a city that constantly battled disease, disaster, and the unknown. But for the Black New Orleanians, their experience with medicine was far different from the polished glass bottles and apothecary shelves on display here. In the same way voodoo was a source of healing and protection, so too were the remedies practiced by herbalists, root workers, and midwives, women and men who knew how to heal fevers, ease childbirth, and treat wounds when doctors wouldn't touch them. I have alum in my apothecary. This is a pill making machine. Some of these folk remedies made their way into mainstream medicine, though their origins were often erased. Others were dismissed, despite being just as effective, if not more, than what some of the pharmacies at the time sold. As I walked through the museum looking at the antique medical tools and the strange concoctions once prescribed as medicine, I saw something familiar. Another story of resilience, another tale of survival. Because whether through faith or through science, people here had enough fight to heal themselves. Walking out of the pharmacy museum, I couldn't help but reflect on the ways people in New Orleans have often found ways to heal through medicine, through faith, through community. There's another kind of healing, one just as sacred: food. Don't like oysters, and you're not going to want to see those because I'm about to throw down. Especially if I can get some that is close to the water if I am down here. Okay. All right, y'all. The waitress said they good too, so I am excited. And they big. These things ain't playing, okay? Look at how big these things are. Look at how big that is. I don't know if y'all can see. Mm. Mm. Yeah, that was fresh. Of course, I'm gonna put some Louisiana hot sauce on it. I like to mix up my tacos. I'll put some horseradish on one, and then I turn around and put hot sauce on another, lemon on another. I mix some horseradish in the oven, but I'm not even doing these. I'm gonna tell y'all my round two here in a minute. Y'all, those mixtures are some of the best oysters that I have ever had. Some of the patty oysters. Oh my goodness, man, I'm about to throw down on this food. Some red beans and rice. I wanted to try to get it like Debbie down here. It is fucking hot. This is good. And the fried chicken too. I'm gonna dump my vegetables right here on the plate. I'm not gonna mix it up, but I had to eat some vegetables, y'all. I don't know if I'm gonna finish all this food. I think I got a lot more jelly. But I did bring the dough tray. Don't pass it by. I'm not gonna try to stick it. You want to say how to do it? You take that chicken, trying to get my camera to focus. I don't think my camera don't focus. So, and it's hot and fresh too. That came right after the I'm trying to form that. And I'm gonna let y'all go. I'm gonna eat my food. Perfect. As the day wound down, I found myself drawn to the Mississippi River, the lifeblood of New Orleans, the silent witness to everything that has ever happened here. I sat on the edge of the water watching the currents move like time itself, always shifting, always carrying stories from one shore to the next. This river has seen everything. It's carried enslaved Africans into the port of New Orleans, the largest port in the U.S. for the transatlantic slave trade. It is a river that symbolizes both bondage and freedom. Generations of Black New Orleanians have relied on the river, not only as a means of transportation and trade, but as a symbol of resilience. African American spirituals were often sung on these waters, and later, jazz, an unmistakable gift of Black culture, echoed through the streets of New Orleans, blending these African rhythms in a defiant act of creativity and freedom. The river carries these legacies in its depths. I thought about how the river, in its timeless flow, reflects the spirit of the people who built this city, who fought for freedom, who created, who dreamed. New Orleans' Black community has always been tied to this water, like a pulse running through the veins of history. And as I sat here watching the sun sink lower, I realized the river, much like the people of New Orleans, keeps moving forward, not being weighed down by the weight of the past, and also not forgetting their past by honoring it. They keep pushing towards the future. I came here searching for something. I don't know, maybe for understanding, maybe for connection. But what I found was, we are not just what happens to us. We are how we rise from it. The river keeps moving, and so do we.